show.
Okay, I'm Ernie Chambers, and once again, I have a few thoughts I intend to share with you today. Since I have a tendency to roam, I decided to bring some materials related to former President Donald Trump and some things that I put in writing, and newspaper accounts touched on these things to show that without having studied him a great deal, just listening to him, watching the way he conducted himself while he was trying to get the nomination, I drew certain conclusions about him and the kind of person he is. I don't want to get too far off on the subject of vaccinations and Cyrus. So what I did was brought a rhyme that I wrote called Ode to COVID-19. And this will be all I will have to say about the pandemic. Cyrus the virus, extremely desirous of raging like uncontrolled fire. Cyrus the virus did pen on papyrus, would that all humans expire. Cyrus the virus does not admire us. If it could have its own way, it would inspire us, then would require us by recklessness ourselves to slay. O Cyrus the virus, forget not King Pyrrhus, who dealt the Romans what for? A victory he won, but when all was done, King Pyrrhus lost the war. Cyrus the virus, the fate of King Pyrrhus awaits you if man but relents. Your days are numbered when minds unencumbered embrace medical science and sense. What I'm going to start with today is an invitation that I received from Donald Trump's operation in March of 2007, a few years ago. And it was addressed in cursive on the envelope, Ernest W. Chambers, 3116 North 24th Street. In those days, I used the barbershop as the mailing address, Omaha, Nebraska, 68110-1915. And then on the envelope, in a box, special invitation, which was very fancily printed. It was called Creating Wealth the Trump Way. I shall now read what was sent to me those long years ago. Dear Mr. Chambers, please be my personal guest to hear my real story on Trump wealth creation from my son, Donald Trump Jr., and also be trained by 4 self-made multimillionaire experts. Donald Trump Jr. will share with you our family's most successful wealth-creating secrets and strategies. As my special VIP guest, I have enclosed 2 VIP personal guest tickets, and you will receive a special gift, a complimentary edition of, this is the name of the book, Trump, in all capital letters, Think Like a Millionaire. At the conference, you will receive this free gift. The suggested tuition fee of $149 is waived for you. At this once-in-a-lifetime financial conference, you will learn how to, number 1, find income-producing properties the Trump way. 2, slash capital gains tax to 0 when you sell real estate, stocks, or your business. 3, lower your current tax bill up to 31%. 4, negotiate the Trump way. 5, protect 100% of your personal assets from all lawsuits, liens, levies, bankruptcy, or even a divorce. 6, get government-approved investments guaranteeing 9.6% to 32% return. 7, Learn the Trump way to cash in on the new $1 trillion booming foreclosure opportunity in 2007. Creating wealth the Trump way. Turn this special invitation over to see the location, date, and time of the event. Call now to accept this invitation at 800-748-5254. Seating is limited. Be there. Just one new idea can make you rich. Then there's a picture of Donald Trump with a book beside it. And the item that I was to look at tells me where the location, date, and time would be observed. Omaha, Nebraska, Doubletree Hotel and Executive Meeting Center, Omaha downtown, 1616 Dodge Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68102. Thursday, April 5th, 2007, 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Then the tickets were enclosed. Naturally, I wasn't going to pay $149 to go listen to Donald Trump's son talk. But nevertheless, I decided to keep this material as a souvenir. That was in 2007. Trump announced in 2016, I believe, may have been 2015, but that he was going to run for the presidency, and it was laughed at by everybody. The Lincoln Journal-Star had a column about the legislature. It was called Capitol Days. And this is what was written on February 18th, 2016. Donald Trump is an undercover Democrat, Omaha Senator Ernie Chambers said during Wednesday debate. He called the Republican presidential candidate a bomb planted to destroy the GOP. Quote, and that's why he has so much fun, Chambers said. I predicted before Trump was even nominated that his goal was to destroy the Republican Party. Trump had been a Democrat. He had been in favor of a woman's right to choose to have an abortion, the traditional Democratic principles, but I guess he thought he might have a better chance to win if he ran as a Republican, because there are a lot of nutty, backward people in that party. There was a lot of racism that they had to keep concealed, but it was bubbling very near the surface, and he thought he would give it an outlet, so he decided to run. What I decided to do was write Mr. Trump a letter, an open letter. And in order that I could document it, the fact that I had written it, I got documentation from the post office as to where this letter was sent, which was Mr. Donald Trump, Trump Tower, 725 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10022. There was a proof of delivery. I overnighted it. I mailed it November 3rd, and it was received November 4th in Donald Trump's mailroom, and the person in the mailroom gave initials to prove that it was accepted. I didn't want these things that I had said, some of them in the way of a prediction, to appear that I said them after the fact. My letter, this open letter to Donald Trump that I'm going to read, and these pages are large, not that they have a lot of material, but now that jeepers creepers, why am I wearing these cheaters? Because I do what's necessary under the circumstances to achieve my goal. And since I want to read without doing too much stumbling and fumbling, I put my cheaters on. This letter was sent, as I said, November 3rd, 2016. Dear Donnie, oh, and by the way, I included copies of that material that I read just before starting so that he would know that I am a person to whom an invitation had been sent to this thing that he was putting on. Dear Donnie, I hope you don't mind my using the diminutive familiar. That's what you call it when you don't use a person's formal name. And I don't think he liked to be called Donnie. Anyway, I do not expect my name to ring a bell with you, but as you see from the items attached to this page, which was that invitation and the comments I made about supporting his being selected, you can see that we go back a ways, not as far back as you and young Bush on the bus, but far back enough. This young Bush is a person who had played a tape where Donald Trump was talking about how famous people could do anything, that women would let you grab their privates, you could have your way with them. And when this was played over television, naturally with certain bleeps and deletions, Trump's supporters were very shook up, and they said immediately, "Oh, this was just locker room talk. He didn't mean it." When he asked his wife, they asked his wife, uh, Manila Trumper, Manila Trump, what she thought about it. She said, "Oh, darling, that is just locker room talk. No, nothing it means nothing." Well, she knows what he was doing when she came to him. But at any rate, I'll continue. That's my reference to Bush on the bus. As the days dwindle down to a precious few, it is time for me, as your self-appointed ambassador without portfolio, AWOP, to write this letter to you. In keeping with the so-called October surprise craze, exacerbated by the Comey fiasco, I am contributing my own version of a November surprise, which is this open letter to you. And that Comey surprise in November was the stuff he brought out about Hillary Clinton and stuff on her server and some things that indicated the FBI might open an investigation, and it immediately wiped out a lot of the support that Hillary Clinton had. And this term, November surprise, has come into being because almost in every election, there is something unforeseen that might turn the tide, which is exposed by one party or the other. Continuing the letter, mirroring the extraordinarily unique nature and style of your campaigning, the format of this letter by turns will be stream of consciousness. That means you just say whatever comes into your head, phrases, clauses, and so forth. Episodic, herky-jerky, helter-skelter, and even a little bit jumbled and jivey. Understandably, you may wonder why in the world would a man who is an unapologetic supporter of Hillary Clinton be simultaneously the self-appointed AWOP of her opponent? Here's why. In view of the fact that I want her to be president, I wanted her to have an opponent whom she could beat and thereby waltz, polka, rumba, samba, or otherwise dance her way into the White House. Don't bail out yet, Donnie. I stated several times on the floor of the legislature, and by the way, those proceedings are carried gavel to gavel by broadcast live on public television and streamed on the internet, that I am the quote, unofficial, unappointed campaign manager, unquote, for Donald Trump, and that my goal is to see him become the Republican Party's nominee for president, with emphasis on nominee, since my choice for president is Hillary Clinton. I presented my case in advance of Nebraska Republicans being seized by a moral imperative to join the Trump lemming march to the sea, preparatory to boarding the cruise ship Trump Titanic. Then I dropped the bombshell contained in the attached newspaper clipping, which was that he was a bomb planted in the Republican Party to destroy it. When the destruction is completed, And here is the statement I want you to remember. Based on developments, my first stated goal has been realized. You are the nominee. I am confident that the second, your destruction of the Republican Party from within, is on the verge of fruition. When the destruction is completed, you will have turned a common cliche upside down. Instead of saying the captain goes down with the ship, we'll be able to proclaim in this instance, all thanks and praise to you, the ship is going down with the captain, the ship being the Republican Party. Anybody who has followed politics is aware that the stalwarts, the old timers, and the Republican Party feel that Trump has all but destroyed it. I saw it coming before they did, maybe even before Trump knew he would be successful. Continuing. Once again, the man who put the I in egoist will have confirmed his paramountcy and demonstrated the uncanny ability to eclipse whatever is going on around him. Not too shabby a consolation prize. The purpose of this correspondence is to encourage you to stay the course. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. That is susceptible of two interpretations. It could mean that the tough will double down, as you are inclined to do, and redouble their efforts, even if it serves only to make matters worse. On the other hand, the tough can get going in the sense of scrambling to their feet and running away, which you are not inclined to do. Lest you misunderstand based on what I've written, my intent, let me make it clear by borrowing a famous passage from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Lest you misperceive my intent. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. But with this essential, significant difference. I come not to bury Donald Trump, but to praise him. Yes, to praise him. Of course, skeptics and cynics may try to get their dig in by invoking an equally famous phrase from poet Alexander Pope's An Essay on Man, to damn with faint praise, thereby insinuating a hidden motive on my part. I assure you that my words are as sincere and trustworthy as those you have been uttering throughout your historic political sojourn. In the interest of clarity, praise is not synonymous with agreement. I extend praise because you are what you are, as sly as a fox, slippery as an eel, unreliable as a used car salesman, unstable as water, volatile as the stock market, unpredictable as the weather, and to this code, as even a casual observer will note, you are true. Take an extreme example. People say of Judas Iscariot, quote, although he betrayed Jesus, he can be given credit or praise for having hanged himself in remorse. But since I like to put the cork in the bottle, use your situation as an example. GOP distant as Trump praises Putin. Are we in sync? Here's a headline, a caption, Trump's 3 theorems or theories of political expediency. People have heard of Einstein's theory of relativity, Newton's laws, gravity and motion, Occam's razor, which deals with when you're talking, take the shortest path with the fewest detours to get to the point you're trying to make, and Machiavelli's The Prince. But this is the first time Trump's theorems will have seen the light of day. I doubt that you yourself have formulated them in the manner that follows. I am going to have to digress. When people started making fun of Trump because he couldn't spell words, when he attacked the Ricketts family, which I'll get to, he misspelled Ricketts, and those kind of things, He made the remark about himself, I am a stable genius. And even then, let's analyze that. What is a stable? A place where various animals stay. What do animals do in the stable? They mess it up. So a stable genius is one who knows how to go into the stable and clean up the mess the animals leave to such an extent you can't even tell it was there. So without realizing that he was telling a deeper truth, he told the truth on himself, referring to himself as a stable genius. Trump has given me a lot of moments of laughter and amusement, but as things worked out, his tenure was anything but laughter-filled and amusing to the people who were victimized by him, and democracy, which indeed suffered, the reputation of the United States, which failed throughout the world. But to continue, having carefully followed and analyzed your words and actions to the extent that such things are susceptible of analysis and formulation, I've undertaken the task of producing the 3 theorems of Trump political expediency. I don't know whether you arrived at these, quote, truths or theorems through study and conscious thought, or if they just, quote, came to you, unquote, unbidden like photosynthesis, or in the way that water flows downhill and seeks its level. In a nutshell, here's the essence of each. The first theorem, fool all. The second theorem, lie, dumb down. The third, promise them the world. Now, there are 3 playbooks that I suggested Trump would use. Each theorem would follow a playbook of a well-known personage. Abraham Lincoln's playbook, Hitler's playbook, Mein Kampf, and Satan's playbook. First theorem from Lincoln's playbook. Honest Abe famously said, and he laid out 3 propositions. It is true that you may fool all the people some of the time. You can even fool some of the people all of the time. That's the second proposition. But you cannot fool all the people all the time. The third proposition. That was Lincoln's playbook. The supporters who make up your base fit within the second clause. You can fool some of the people all of the time. And you have done so and are doing so masterfully. Regardless of what you say or do, no matter how outlandish, preposterous, untrue, unintelligible, your base unthinkingly and uncritically remains steadfastly with you, come H or high water. Fool all has been achieved. That's theorem number 1. The second theorem from Hitler's playbook. This is from his book, Mein Kampf. All propaganda has to be popular and has to adapt its spiritual level to the perception of the least intelligent of those towards whom it intends to direct itself. The great masses of people will more easily fall victims to a big lie than to a small one. In summary, tell big lies and appeal to the least intelligent. You once declared that you, quote, love uneducated people, unquote. Did you by chance have your second theorem in mind? As king of hyperbole and superlative, you have regularly unleashed some whoppers, which your base thrives on like a hungry lion devouring red meat. A sub-theorem might be, if you're going to strike out, do so swinging for the fences rather than trying to bunt. So you lay out some whoppers, that propaganda that Hitler talked about. For the record, this is not to assert that you are a Nazi or that your ideology is Nazism, although some have made such an allegation. My point is merely to show the similarity between your approach and Hitler's is inescapable. Examples showing how dumb you feel these people are. promise everything to everybody at a cost to nobody. 2, the U.S. can sustain itself as a self-contained economic island on this planet. 3, reopen obsolete Rust Belt manufactories to produce goods for sale only on the U.S. market and give millions of good high-wage jobs to everybody who wants one, and there's no reason to raise the minimum wage, which is too high anyway. 4, never detail how anything is to be accomplished. It simply will be, period. 5, don't mention Congress, because you'll do all these fantastical things yourself. That's what Trump feeds his base. Theme song of the second theorem. You know, there has to be a playlist. Here's his theme song. I fling untruths into the air. They fall to earth, I know not where. And furthermore, I do not care. All in war and politics is fair. And finally, in the fairy tale, Rumpelstiltskin was a deformed dwarf who could spin straw into gold. Using that example, you could be dubbed Trumpelstiltskin due to your ability to spin a glaring untruth into an authoritative sounding assertion of incontrovertible fact, which your base will swallow. Lying and dumbing down have been achieved by you by way of your second theorem, again, in masterful manner with your base. Third theorem, Satan's handbook. Now, I shouldn't demean the devil in this fashion, but he can take it. And that theorem is promise them the world. In chapter 5 of Matthew are 3 verses, 8, 9, and 10 are their numbers. Again, the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, and saith unto him, all these things will I give thee if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Then saith Jesus unto him, get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and only him shalt thou serve. The byline could be, fall down and worship me, for that is what happened here when you look at this headline. Trump thrills Christian audience with promise. And this is part of an article from the Washington Post. The audience included leaders and founders of many segments of the Christian right, the evangelical movement that began in the 1970s under people including the late Jerry Falwell. Among those present and involved in the program Tuesday were Focus on the Family founder, James Dobson, who, by the way, is no longer with that group, former Christian Coalition head, Ralph Reed, and evangelist Franklin Graham, son of evangelical icon Billy Graham, who was the religious handle that would fit any political tool in the White House. He would say what any president wanted him to say by way of praise. And when I was a kid and believed as a child, thought as a child, understood as a child, behaved as a child, I listened to Billy Graham on the radio on Sunday, and he would always say at the end, this is Billy Graham, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and may the Lord bless you real good. But as Paul wrote, as he continued what I just quoted, when I became a man, I put away childish things. And now going back to what I'm telling Trump in this letter, again, you handle these holy people, so-called, like a maestro. You know they by and large are actors. They forgot that your entertainment activities equip you to spot frauds a mile away, and such they are, and you know it. Check this out. Despite the fact that your conduct, open and notorious, has been everything but the conduct of a good man, you mocked, the disabled. You have used profanity in public. You've incited and condoned violence at your rallies. You've boasted and jested about sexual assault and being allowed to grab women in their crotches. You've insulted, denigrated, and debased women in general. You've encouraged religious bigotry against Muslims. You've insulted, stereotyped, and disparaged Mexicans as rapists, criminals, and murderers. Yet, because you made promises to those religious hypocrites and showed them all the kingdoms of the world as part of the package, they in effect fell down and worshiped you. And a lot of them, the so-called Christian conservatives, continue to worship that devil to this day. Becoming willfully blind, here's what those Christians had to do in order to go along with your program and gain your support. He walks like a duck. He quacks like a duck. He looks like a duck. Therefore, he is a chicken. To top it all off, they ignored Jesus's caution. In Mark chapter 10, the 25th verse, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. Yet they're in league with him, these Christians. You are the master manipulator. You could teach Satan himself a thing or two. Is it become increasingly evident why I throw praise your way? Donald Trump as Teflon political. Donnie, I deal in analogies. You are the political equivalent of the late mafia kingpin John J. Gotti, with whom you share a middle initial. He came to be known as the Teflon Don because nothing stuck in terms of charges for various and sundry criminal activities ranging from murder, kidnapping, and bribery. A natty dresser enamored of sartorial elegance, in other words, he liked to dress to the nines, he was dubbed the Dapper Don. He worked his way up through the ranks from petty crook to captain in the Gambino crime family, the best organized and most powerful crime outfit in the country. In 1985, the Teflon Don took over the operation after he ordered the rubbing out of then top dog Paul Castellano. Poor Paul met his maker as he exited a Manhattan steakhouse, indicating perhaps that consuming too much red meat may be detrimental to one's health. Finally, Boss Gotti's luck ran out, and his Teflon veneer was perforated when fellow mobster Sammy the Bull Gravino turned into Sammy the Rat, as stool pigeons were known in the rackets, and testified against him in a deal with the feds. In 1992, a baker's dozen, 13 charges stuck, including murder and racketeering, and the no longer Teflon Don swapped sartorial elegance, fine clothes, for prisoner togs and took up residency at the federal big house in Marion, Illinois. He contracted throat cancer, was transferred to a medical facility for federal prisoners in Springfield, Missouri, and was harvested by the Grim Reaper June 10th, 2002, at the age of 61. Thusly did the Teflon Don, born in the Bronx, October 27, 1940, meet his Waterloo. A major difference between you and Gotti is that you were born at the top, not at the bottom to work your way up. And the only thing you knew about real work was that people of the lower orders did it. Thus, another point at which you are due praise for your savvy or cunning. You managed to rally to your cause, to become your base, the very people toward whom you harbor contempt and distaste. The great unwashed hordes. You would never socialize with them. You wouldn't rub elbows with them, and certainly would never dream of inviting them to dinner. The point where you and the Teflon Don meet is that in the same way that criminal charges did not stick to him, political opposition, criticism, condemnation, etc., have not stuck to you, no matter the quarter from which they emanated. On the other hand, you are unable to stake claim to sartorial elegance due to your ill-fitting big suits, so Dapper Don you are not. In fact, you could be dubbed Trumpelstiltskin, but 1 out of 2 ain't bad, right? Whereas some people dream the impossible dream, you revel in and thrive on the unstickable political negatives that would demolish any other politician. You are more Teflon than was Gotti and a more accomplished escape artist than Harry Houdini. Here are just a few of the headlines. Romney blasts Trump as a phony, a fraud, and a danger. Another headline, few experienced GOP strategists are willing to work for Trump team. Another, hypocrisy in Trump's campaign. Republicans do not donate to Trump. Gary Johnson says Trump is, quote, clearly a racist. Mexican president says Trump's language is like that of Hitler. Trump's new slogan has old baggage from the Nazi era. Villains grow as Trump polls slide. Star tweet haunts Trump. GOP reaches new level of panic over Trump. Trump may delay release of tax returns, but a federal court ordered them released. He's being investigated in 3 jurisdictions and facing the possibility of criminal charges. So he may suffer the fate of the Teflon Don to whom nothing stuck when Gravino testified against him and he wound up in the big house. Trump may wind up in the big house. We'll just have to wait and see. He was called the huckster populist. GOP big shots turn on Trump over his attack on judges. Trump used charity money to buy sports memorabilia for himself. Now we get to something that comes right down to Nebraska. Let me touch on something that is very much worthy of note. The story can be told mostly by way of newspaper articles. The first article is dated February 22nd, 2016. Trump says Ricketts family is, quote, against me. Donald Trump took aim at the Ricketts family Monday after it was disclosed that Marlene Ricketts, the wife of Joe Ricketts, was behind an anti-Trump super PAC that pummeled Trump via direct mail pieces in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. Trump issued a veiled threat against the family on his famous Twitter account, accusing them of, quote, secretly, unquote, spending money against his presidential bid. For the record, Ricketts's donation was publicly disclosed over the weekend by the Federal Election Commission, another lie by Trump. Trump's tweet said, I hear the Ricketts family, and he misspelled Ricketts, put 1 T instead of 2. I hear the Ricketts family, who own the Chicago Cubs, are secretly spending $signs against me. They better be careful. They have a lot to hide. I repeat, they better be careful. They have a lot to hide. Marlene Ricketts fired back through a spokesman saying, Trump was too unpredictable to be president. Then this is what Brian Baker, an advisor to the Ricketts family, said by way of a response. Marlene Ricketts shares the disappointment of many Trump supporters who believed that our leaders in Washington have failed us, and who also believe our next president must be a principled leader. In her view, Donald Trump has not been a consistent conservative and therefore would be unpredictable as our party leader, unquote. Marlene Ricketts gave $3 million to a super PAC known as Our Principles PAC. It was created in January with the help of Katie Packer, a former aide to Mitt Romney in his 2012 presidential campaign. Ricketts is married To Joe Ricketts, Marlene Ricketts is married to Joe Ricketts, the founder of TD Ameritrade, a successful online trading company. She and Joe are the parents of Pete Ricketts, the governor of Nebraska. And on old Joe, he's slick, and a nut doesn't fall far from the tree in terms of young Pete's dishonesty. This Ricketts came before the Omaha City Council, persuaded them to give what is called TIF money, tax increment financing, which allowed him to avoid having to pay taxes, as would be the case, and will make money available to him in effect to build a new TD Ameritrade headquarters in a part of West Omaha, which is neither deteriorated or substandard. And the people who lived there were very, very angry. Then after getting this money from the suckered Omaha City Council, by the way, Joe Ricketts lives in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, because he doesn't want to pay Nebraska income taxes. So he doesn't want to pay taxes in Nebraska, but he got several millions of dollars of tax breaks from Nebraska taxpayers. That's how dumb these white politicians, along with Ben Gray on the city council, were. And after Joe Ricketts built this TD Ameritrade headquarters, guess what he did? He sold it. He sold it. And if you watch television every morning, you'll see who bought it. And he sold it for $26 billion. Then my comments after that article. Being rich and accustomed to having their way, the Ricketts family failed to take time to find out who they were messing with. The article contains the warning you issued. It reminds me of a situation where the housekeeper of an archbishop was of the opinion that skeletons are found in every family's closet. To test her theory, she wrote with lipstick on the mirror used by the archbishop when he shaved each morning, quote, "I know your secret," unquote. Before an hour elapsed, he disappeared and was never seen or heard from again. Now, I don't know whether or not you have the goods on the Ricketts clan, but look what appeared in the World Herald, September 21st, 2016, a few months after you were being attacked by Joe and Marlene Ricketts. Ricketts family to donate to pro-Trump effort. You said you had something on. They had a lot to hide, didn't you? Well, here's what was in the paper. Joe Ricketts until now, quote, "Donald Trump isn't fit for the most important job in the world. If you believe America deserves better, vote against Donald Trump. Donald Trump's too reckless and dangerous to be president." And here's what he's saying now. Proud to support Trump and Pence and other Republican leaders who will push for conservative policy solutions. Then a big headline, Ricketts' money now backs Trump. Very praiseworthy. One of the baddest members of the dinosaur family was the Tyrannosaurus Rex, king of the clan, known as T-Rex. After the way you kicked the Ricketts families, pardon the expression, rump, they probably refer to you among themselves as T-Rump. Considering that you made any number of political big shots and hot shots turn around, a little ode to T-Rump, a rhyme, is in order. Ricketts's, Paul Ryan, Cruz, Rubio, Newt Gingrich, Christie, and all the rest are examples. You made them falter and brought them to heel. Then at your altar, you forced them all to kneel, and they did. Then here's a headline. Due to change, Trump made a big campaign change. And you all can't see this, but it's a picture of Trump in a pose very similar to mine. And the headline is Trump made big campaign change. So this picture of me was in the paper, and I put it next to Trump's, and under mine, the caption is, Senator Chambers makes a point during debate on the floor of the legislature in February. Chambers is seen as the master of the filibuster in the legislature. Under Trump, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump speaks during a campaign rally in New York. So, my question, did the big campaign change consist of stealing my gesture, then ending my letter to Donnie? I know you have better things to do than to read a letter about yourself. But as you lick your wounds after the election, you may find solace or comfort by comparison in reading this. Sincerely, Ernie Chambers, State Senator. And here is what Pete Ricketts wrote, or a big headline, after the Ricketts family attacked Trump, saying he was unfit. Governor Ricketts says, Trump administration, pleasure to work with. This was June 30th, 2017 in the Lincoln Journal-Star. Nebraska's Republican governor said he's had plenty of access to the nation's first-year Republican president and his cabinet. President Donald Trump has been, quote, forward-thinking, unquote, in engaging governors on policy issues, Governor Pete Ricketts told reporters Thursday. Quote, that never happened in the last administration, unquote. Trump hosted Ricketts and 3 other governors Wednesday at the White House for a roundtable discussion on energy issues. And some people say that he made bootlickers out of all of them. And when the persons who said that were asked, how dare you say they're bootlickers? He said, well, I saw the shoe polish around their mouth and on their teeth. That's what was going on. Now, I have a couple of other items. I brought a clock to keep track of the time, and I did not keep track of when I started, so I'm going to have to take my signals from those who keep better time. But there were some things that I did because I don't throw a rock and hide my hand. If I'm going to say something about somebody, I say it openly and publicly. Chambers seeks Trump's removal. This was in May of 2017. Senator offers resolution asking for Trump's swift ouster before anybody else. And this is an excerpt. State Senator Ernie Chambers of Omaha says he'll introduce a resolution seeking President Donald Trump's expulsion from office. Quote, if these people don't do something about removing him from office, then this could be, I'm not an alarmist, the beginning of the end for the United States, unquote, Chambers said Tuesday. A draft of the resolution calls on appropriate officials to invoke the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution to determine whether Trump's actions and conduct make him unfit for office, in which case the vice president should serve in his place. Trump, the resolution states, has behaved, quote, in a dangerously problematic and erratic manner, such that the safety and welfare of the United States and its residents are being placed at ongoing grave risk. The resolution carries no official weight, and it is unlikely lawmakers will be forced to vote on it before this year's legislative session ends. And they did stall and not let it even come up for a hearing, and I'll touch on that. Chambers, a registered nonpartisan who once jokingly supported Trump's run for the Republican presidential nomination, has been a constant critic of the president's policies and actions in office. Chambers said his resolution was not inspired by the whirlwind of recent news surrounding Trump's controversial disclosure of classified information to Russian officials and his firing of FBI Director James Comey. Instead, Chambers said Trump's foreign policy decisions, particularly those regarding North Korea and the Middle East, have the potential to do great harm to Americans. The president has behaved like a, quote, deranged, demented, drunken idiot and underestimated Kim Jong-un insulting the North Korean leader and stirring him to test more missiles, unquote, Chambers said. Kim Jong-un is not crazy, he is not a fool, and he is a much faster learner than Donald Trump, added Chambers. Now, I knew the legislature would try to get out of doing anything with that resolution, and in fact, they did not call a hearing. But the following year, I did ask that the chairman of the committee bring the resolution for a hearing. If he didn't, I would make a motion on the floor to pull it from committee, and I would thereby have the discussion publicly that he was trying to avoid. The following year, he did schedule it for a hearing over the noon hour, and such being the case, not a large number of people showed up. But I had a chance to make a point, and it was one that some people took to heart. And I'm not going to read that. I think I will just paraphrase it. I had mentioned the kind of things that Trump had done at that hearing, just so it would be a matter of record. Even though it was over the noon hour and not a large number of people in the public showed up because they were at work. But I talked about the number of people he had hired and fired, which showed that he was not a good judge of character. Various policies he had put in place that exposed his racism, his hatred of Muslims and Black people. And then I spoke of what I call a one-act play. And I said, this is what that one act, one scene play will consist of. Now, before I mention that to you, recently on television, the former head of the military, the top general, said that as the election, the last one approached, and Trump was making all these kind of statements, suggesting that the election was stolen, that something would have to be done if Biden was proclaimed president, that it alarmed people in the military, including himself, and he notified the top military people to be prepared to take action if Trump did anything, and he didn't use the word coup, that suggested a coup was undertaken, then the military would step in because they had sworn an oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Now, that was just a few days ago. I gave my conversation way back in 2018, which may not seem too far away, but that's 3 years ago at least. I had had this to say before that committee. There was a table behind which sat 4 generals. A person who is court-martialed is never judged by people of lower rank. So all these generals had their paraphernalia. They had all of the ribbons, combat ribbons. They had all of the medals, and they had the maximum number of stars on their shoulder. And standing before them was a general, similarly attired. He was at attention. His uniform was sharp. He held his hat under his right arm. And before they would reach a decision, he was allowed to address them. He said, I took an oath as you took an oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I took that oath seriously as each one of you took it seriously. I was in combat as each one of you was in combat. I risked my life to carry out my oath as each of you risked your life for a similar reason. I killed men during combat, in upholding my oath, as each one of you have killed men. And now I stand before you to be judged. And then I departed from that and said, in this country, if you utter certain words, they can be twisted to be construed as a threat against the president or advocating violence against the president. So I'm not going to say exactly what was said, but I will describe what appeared in the newspaper the next morning. The headline, General court-martialed, sentenced to be executed for assassinating the President of the United States. And that's the way I ended my presentation to that committee. I saw the danger of Trump. I even wrote an item in a letters to the editor column of the Lincoln Journal-Star in June of 2019. They headlined it, President Trump's 5 Principles. This is what I wrote. An appropriate introduction to the 5 principles exemplified to date by the erratic Trump regime is the following list of other numerical points. There are the 14 points of President Woodrow Wilson presented in his January 8th, 1918 message to the Congress. There are the 10 commandments carted down from Mount Sinai by Moses, the famed 7 wonders of the world, comprising the most remarkable structures of ancient times, and the 6-day Middle East War. The 5 principles of Trump are: the U.S. Constitution in the hands of an unprincipled political strongman with the proclivity to so employ it is the ideal instrument or pathway by which to ordain and establish a constitutional dictatorship, aided and abetted by a sycophantic Senate and a supine Supreme Court. 2, would-be dictator Trump, borrowing from Lord Thomas Babington Macaulay, arrived on the political scene, quote, ready, booted, and spurred to ride, unquote, and corralled millions of compliant Americans, quote, ready, saddled, and bridled to be ridden. 3, a mentally unstable, erratic, weak man with strong weapons is volatile, unpredictable, and dangerous in the extreme in a jumpy world on nuclear tenterhooks with an itchy finger on a hair trigger. 4, children of whatever age should never be allowed to play with matches. 5, a pyromaniac, that's an arsonist, a pyromaniac should be barred from keeping and bearing a blazing torch in a gunpowder factory. While campaigning for the presidency, Trump asserted, I love uneducated people, which is the perfect lead-in to the words of another would-be dictator. Quote, all propaganda has to be popular and has to adapt its spiritual level to the perception of the least intelligent of those towards whom it intends to direct itself. The great masses of the people will more easily fall victim of a big lie than to a small one. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf, which I mentioned among his theorems. Then, to my surprise, a response was written a few days later in the same letters to the editor column. Headline, Chambers gets it right on Trump. In reference to Senator Ernie Chambers' letter to the editor, President Trump's 5 principles, June 23rd, he sure nailed it. Maybe it should be printed again. People should also heed the philosopher George Santayana's warning, quote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And he signed it. He was from a little town called Crete. Now, I do not intend to go off on another tangent, so I'm going to end this presentation. My name is Ernie Chambers, for those who may not know, and that's the traditional way to end it. And as said the canary, when the door to his cage was left open, I'm out of here.
Thank you for watching The Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to make suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This has been an EWC Communication production.